Okay, I have one more set of functions to go over before we take a look at some potential Drupal editors. Okay, I'm going to scroll down here. So in this section, we're going to talk about variable get, variable set, and variable del, which is short for delete. Now, we've used these functions in previous videos, but I wanted to go through them in detail and give you a working example you could play with in a very simple format. If you want to learn more about these functions, go ahead and visit these pages on api.drupal.org. Okay, so what we're going to do here, let me go ahead and jump to our page. This example basically is demonstrated through these three sentences. The first sentence says the variable is currently set to 5, so we're using variable get here to grab a variable from the variable database table. The second sentence is also a link, which says increment the variable by 1. So if we click this, it will increment the variable. All that's happening here actually is that the page is being refreshed, and on every page refresh, the variable gets incremented by 1. And finally, we have a delete the variable link that when clicked will clear out the variable and then the count will start at 0 again. Okay, let's take a look at the source code. We're starting here by using variable get to get a variable. Now the first time that this loads, if you're using this example code, the variable won't exist, so we need to supply it a default variable, and that's 0. So when you set variables, you're going to use the module name and an underscore as a prefix to the variable. The reason you do this is to prevent any namespace collisions with other modules. Every module shares the same variables table, so we want to make sure that we don't override any variables or collide with any variables that exist already. Next, we're incrementing the variable by 1 so that we can then save the variable with variable set as the new value. So every time the page refreshes, this code will run and the variable will get saved. So it will look like it will increment by 1 every time the page is reloaded. So variable set and variable get are very similar. Variable get as the second parameter takes a default value, and variable set as the second parameter sets the value. Okay, our next step is to add some functionality that allows us to reset the variable or delete it, and do so whenever there's a variable in the query string called clear. So we're checking to see if there's a clear variable, and then if so, we're going to go ahead and run variable delete. And this will delete our variable from the table. But then again, on the next page load, this variable set will run and it will be created again. The next step is to create some output for our page. So we're just setting a title on this line. And then this next line is where we display what our current variable is set at. So the first sentence, the variable is currently set to, and then we use variable get to grab our variable. Again, we're setting a default value for it whenever we use variable get. Next, we have a period and an L, which is our link function. So we're passing it some link text as the first parameter and the path as the second parameter. In this case, we want to go to our tips page, which we're currently on. So this will actually just refresh the page. Next, we're adding a link to delete the variable. And so delete the variable is the text that we're passing to the L function. The path is tips. And then we're passing it an array so we can add the clear parameter to the query string. So we're setting clear to 1. So whenever this is clicked, clear will be set in the query string, and this code up here will run, and the variable will be deleted. Okay, let's go ahead and see that in action. I'm going to jump back to our page, and I'm going to click the delete the variable link. Okay, if we scroll down, now we'll see that the variable is currently set to 0. Okay, right on, that worked. The final functions that we're going to cover have to do with this alert that displays up at the top when we delete the variable. It says you just cleared the tips variable from 7 to 0. So these messages can be really helpful, and there's a variety of ways to style these according to the intensity level that you want to display them at. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page once more, And you see we have one more item here that says random tip. Internet Explorer has a 31 file limit on style sheets. So this is another message that we're setting of a different style. You see this one's kind of nice. It's got the green check mark, and this one has a caution sign, so it's a bit of a warning. Let's go ahead and look at how these are generated. Okay, I'm going to scroll down a little further. So what we're doing here is using a function called Drupal set message. And if you want to learn more about Drupal set message, just go to this api.drupal.org page. We're checking to see if variable equals 1. So this is pulling the variable from up here where we're incrementing the variable. So right after we delete the variable is incremented by 1, and at that point, this Drupal set message will get triggered. And we're setting it to this random tip about Internet Explorer style sheets. We're going to go ahead and wrap it in a T function because we want this text in particular to be translated. And this is a good way to demonstrate a use of the T function. When we set clear, we want a warning to display that says, hey, you just cleared the variable. So we're going to check for the query string getClear, and we're going to check it for a value of 1, which is what our code sets it at. And then we're going to use Drupal set message, and we're going to use a slightly more complex version of the T function here. So one thing I wanted to demonstrate, going back to the T function, is that if you're translating a single string or a couple strings that are included in some HTML wrappers, you want those wrappers to be on the outside of the T function. So in this case, we're surrounding our text with EM or emphasis, and we don't want to pass that to the T function. That's unnecessary. We don't need to translate that. On the other hand, we have some HTML inside of our text, and instead of separating out this sentence into multiple T functions, it makes sense to pass this HTML as part of the translated string. So we can just translate this entire string when we go to translate it to another language. And we're also using a placeholder here for the variable number. So we're using the exclamation point because we don't need to do any type of sanitization because we're the ones that are keeping track of this number. And we're passing the T function an array with the placeholders, in our case there's just one, and the value that is supposed to replace the placeholder. So in this case we want to replace the number placeholder with the variable, which is our auto-incrementing variable from above. And finally we're going to end our EM wrapper. And then this ends our T function and our string that we're passing to the Drupal set message function. And our second parameter is the level of message that we're going to display. By default, it shows that green one that's just a message, a notification that tells the user something that they just did and probably meant to do. Warning would be used more like maybe somebody just did something that they don't want to do. And there's one more setting called error, which is when there's an actual problem with Drupal, it will display in red. So Drupal set message is a great little utility for interacting with users without a lot of overhead. All it is a single function call.